J is for Justice podcast.
Roberta.
Hello again. Welcome back to J is for Justice. My name is Jay. I'm your host. Welcome to my channel. If you enjoy true crime and live breaking news, please consider subscribing. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Today's live is going to be a cold case from the state of Michigan, a small town called Vicksburg. Taking you back to 1983 with this case. It is unsolved, and the family is desperate for people to come forward because somebody knows something. With all of the coverage of the Kiely Rodni case, when this case came across my news feed, I hadn't even thought of this case in many years. But I'd like to go over it with you because of the similar circumstances. 16-year-old boy goes to a party. Dad wakes up in the morning and finds his son dead in their yard. So let's get into the case of Erik Stirling Cross. I start with the words of Erik's sister. About a month before Erik was murdered, my mom and dad and I went on an overnight trip without him. When we got home, there was a note on the counter from Erik that said he had run away from home because he had gotten into a fender bender with my dad's car. It wasn't serious, but he wasn't supposed to have used my dad's car. My parents were very upset, and I was too. I went to my room, and I remember thinking I would never see him again. I really believed he was gone for good. From the after-school specials I had seen, I figured that he was already lost on the streets of New York. I looked out the back window and remembered the last time I had seen him. He had been riding his motorbike in the unplanted cornfield behind our house. I could see him in my mind's eye kicking up the dirt as he rode across the field. That was what he had been doing when we left for our trip. I wished so much that I could see him again. As I looked out the window, I noticed that Erik's dog, Dee Dee, was sniffing around the tent that we had set up in the backyard. I went out there to see what he was so interested in. It turned out Erik was hiding in the tent. He asked me to please not tell Mom and Dad. I was so relieved and happy. When I went back in the house, my mom noticed a change in my mood and asked what happened. She asked me if I knew where Erik was. I remained loyal to Erik and didn't tell her. Of course, now I think I should have told her, but at the time, I wanted to please Erik and be part of his secret plan. I can't remember how long it was before my parents figured out where he was. But of course, my mom, as mothers do, then knew that I had known all along. Erik knew that I had kept his secret, which is one reason why I reject the theory that Erik tried to get in our house on the night of June 25th, 26th, but couldn't get in because he had forgotten his key. I know he would have knocked on my window and asked me to let him in. This theory of him not being able to get in the house originally came from the ramblings of the person who confessed to killing Erik. We already know that he and his conspirators are liars, so why believe him on this point? It was a gift from God that I had the short time of thinking Erik was gone from our lives. I truly appreciated him at that moment, and I realized how empty my life would be without him. Then I was given one more month with him, during which we got along better than we ever had before. Even though I didn't get to say goodbye to him, I am thankful that he died knowing that his sister loved and appreciated him and was on his side. Now, a parent's worst nightmare. Erik's story. During the early morning hours of June 26, 1983, a father's worst nightmare came true. The father of 16-year-old Erik Stirling Cross walked outside of his Vicksburg, Michigan home to grab the morning newspaper and discovered his son dead on the side of the road. It's been 30 years since that dreadful morning, and the murder of the 16-year-old Vicksburg high school student remains unsolved. The blue-eyed, red-headed teenage boy attended a party the night before, less than a mile from his home. He left the party around 1 a.m., according to police. His father told investigators that just before 6 a.m., he was awakened by the sound of a car with a loud muffler. According to Erik's father, the car pulled into the driveway, left, and returned a second time before speeding off into the distance. Police say little is known about Erik's whereabouts between the time he left the party and when his body was discovered. What authorities do know is that evidence at the scene indicated he was dragged by a vehicle and deliberately struck. An autopsy report states Erik suffered, quote, a number of fatal lesions that contributed to his death, including numerous fractures, lacerations, and abrasions that left his body mangled. The Kalamazoo County Sheriff's Office says Erik may have been involved in an altercation with a group of core individuals before leaving the party. However, the medical examiner stated in his report that Erik's body was so badly injured that they were unable to determine if any of his injuries were sustained before he was fatally struck. No arrests have been made in the case, but authorities say they have identified a group of 4 to 5 people who are considered persons of interest in Erik's homicide. A neighbor working in his yard at the time of the murder told police he saw a vehicle occupied by 2 white males and a white female near Erik's home. In 2012, Erik's sister, Jackie Mitchell, created a Facebook page in memory of her brother. And police hope that page might spark people's memories and help catch this killer. Erik's sister is quoted as saying about the Facebook page, "My goal with the Facebook page was originally to keep Erik's memory alive. It only evolved into being a tool to bring justice after so many other people became interested in this case. And so many people from Vicksburg contacted me expressing shock that no one had ever been arrested. We maintain faith in God and know that our peace does not depend on what does or does not happen to Erik's killers." She added, "It won't help us much at this point to see the killers and their accomplices in jail. It won't change what they did to us or how our family. It may prevent future crimes by those obviously unstable and dangerous individuals who killed Erik and who treat human life like garbage. Please, if you have any information on this case, even the smallest of details, please click on the Report a Tip button located at the top of this site." And the site where I got this information from will be in the description of this video. Now I'd like to take a deeper dive into the night that Erik Cross was brutally murdered. It's nice to meet you, Missy.
Nice to meet you. I appreciate you being interested in Erik's case and wanting to help.
Oh, absolutely. And I appreciate you coming on and being willing to share his story so we can help, raise awareness. I've heard about his case for a long time. I'm from Michigan originally, so I'm very familiar with the case. I've heard about it over the years, and it's sad. It's really sad.
It's extremely sad. Yeah, it's criminal what's being done to the family as well as what was done to Erik. When you put a family through something like this and you make them hold out for 39 years, and the answers, you've got the case, you've got the questions all answered and ready to go, and you just still hold out for your own whatever reasons, political and otherwise. It becomes a second criminal case.
Yeah. So are you friends of the family then?
Yes.
Okay. So did you know them before this happened, or did you get involved for Erik's?
Nope, I knew them in high school. I didn't know Erik. Like, I wasn't friends with Erik or anything like that, but I knew Jackie, his little sister. She's the same age as my younger brother, Erik. And she and I were, I was 2 years ahead of her and 1 year behind her brother, Erik. And I actually, after this happened, we went back to school in the fall of '83. I I would see Jackie. She was a freshman, so she was coming in there, and I just saw this very small, frail girl, and she was just so quiet. And kids would always kind of bombard her with things. And over the years, we've talked about it. And kids back in high school, they think this was back before the internet, back before cell phones and stuff. So everything had to be talked about while you're at school, and the
Right.
school wasn't really allowing that to happen. So you could see Jackie was in a lot of pain, and she had to come back to the school that are that had kids coming to school that were actually involved in killing her brother.
I can't even imagine what that must have been like for her. How
Well,
scary.
yeah, well, and that's the thing. I mean, you're in the hallway with the girls and the boys that are involved in your brother's murder, and kids are trying to be helpful and running up to you all the time as a 13, 14-year-old girl and telling you, "Hey, that's who killed your brother right there." And across the hallway from them or something, or in the lunchroom. And she's like, "Yeah, I know." But what is a 12,
What's she
13
going
year
to
old
do?
girl going to do? Right. And, her parents actually made the attempt to move her out of Vicksburg schools before that fall session started,
Oh, wow.
which is very interesting. They took her to a Kalamazoo school, and the day they were signing her into the Kalamazoo school, um, the principal or someone walked by and said, "Wow, what's going on in Vicksburg? You're the third family this week." And her parents kind of froze in their tracks, and they're like, "Can we ask who the other families were?" And they were the two families involved in their son's murder. So they said, "Never, no, never mind. We'll take her back to Vicksburg." And
Wow.
they took her back to Vicksburg. And
Let's go to the beginning. So, was Erik friends with these kids? Like, did he
Erik,
hang out with
Erik,
them?
Erik was friends with Bill Cook. He was friendly with Amber from school. Erik was new to the school in fall of 1982. This would have been his actual first summer vacation with Vicksburg High School, Vicksburg students, things like that. He had began making friends through school, and Amber was one of them. And it's kind of the normal old fashioned, hey, the new kid is fresh meat kind of thing in school.
Yeah,
Everybody's attracted. All the girls want to see the new cute kid, and Erik was a cute boy. He was 5'8",
he is cute.
red hair,
I
flipped
have the
hair,
picture
80s.
pulled up of you
Yeah.
guys from the Facebook, um,
Mm.
the
He was
black
a
and white
sweet kid.
photo. Yeah, he looks like a
Yeah,
sweet kid.
very quiet kid. He grew up with a little sister and his parents, and that was a very, very close knit family. When they moved to Vicksburg, they still were very close knit. Jackie and Erik were always together, and then Erik began making friends. Um, Erik's parents are just your good old fashioned, God fearing, believe that the justice system works, believe in people and humanity and stuff. And then um, Erik went to this party with who he thought was his friend, and he ended up murdered. When
Mm.
when we were in high school that spring, Bill Cook would bully Erik. He would, or not Bill Cook, I'm sorry. Brenton Spalding would bully Erik Cross in the hallways at school. There was one situation where I didn't even really know any. I knew of Brent, I knew of Amber, because you're in school with them for so many years
Hmm.
when you grow up in a small town. I didn't grow up around them until high school, really. And in high school is when I got to know what they were like. And, it wasn't my cup of tea because they were just the the drug traffickers, the potheads, the stoners kind of. Yep.
Yep.
I walked out of my first hour class one morning, and this was like, I don't know for sure if it was still early spring or into spring, but it was in '83. And I remember I had a Mr. Cash was our teacher, and I remember all of a sudden just being shoved backwards into the classroom, into the lockers. Thank you. Sorry, I had a buzzing noise.
You're
I
okay.
remember being shoved into the lockers, and then and just being told, get in the room, get in the room, get in the room. And there was a fight going on. Well, what had happened was Brenton had jumped. Erik started walking out of the classroom, and he was just talking to Amber and some other kids in that class, just like kids would talk. And they were, joking, laughing, whatever, because they're coming out of class. Who knows? They're probably making fun of the teacher. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Brent is on top of Erik. He's just pummeled him. He's beating. It took 4 male teachers to pull Brent and Erik apart, mostly
Jesus.
on Brenton's side, because Brenton was just a out of, he he didn't have to control his behavior because he was a Brenton Spalding, which is ridiculous because he wasn't liked. He was just tolerated. And I think he assumed he was much better than he was always.
People
Same as
just didn't
Amber.
want to get in his way type thing.
Yeah, you know what? It's more like if I tolerate him and just ignore it, it'll go away, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the way it was. Now, the other people, the stoners and stuff, they hung out with him, they hung out around him and stuff like that. Brent's the kind of guy that would pick a fight as long as he had bigger guys around him to finish the fight, because he just was always angry and
A bully.
just a bully, and that's the bottom line. He was just a bully. So Erik being new and Amber, Amber was Brent's girlfriend, but Amber was many boys' girlfriend at that same time.
So
But
do you
in
think
Brent's
this
world,
was jealousy between about
I think that
Amber?
well, you know what, that's what it's supposed to be about, but really what it was I think it was opportunity for Brent to continue to make himself look important and big in front of his buddies, because he said in his witness statements and stuff, other people have said, yeah, Brent told me that there was a lot of people standing around watching this. Brent even lists three of his best friends that were there watching the fights. And I think in a lot of this, it was Brent had an opportunity, and he had an opportunity, and he had a small
Erik was
kid,
easy
and
prey.
Erik was easy prey, and Amber was there, so he's got his audience. He wants to impress her. He wants to kind of maybe send a message to Erik and send a message to Amber that, you're mine. He can't have you, but I'm tough, and look what I can do. I can mess that kid up. And
So
then
what did
I think
Erik, I mean, what was Erik thinking about all of this? Was he scared of this guy? Or was he just like,
Erik,
man, he's a jerk?
he's a jerk. He's a bully.
So who are
Over
the
to
five? Let's name the five that were involved.
the
Or
five, well, and the one's deceased now. The younger sister's deceased. So you have Amber Thomas. Back their names in 1983: Amber Thomas,
mm-hmm.
Brenton Spalding, Bill Cook, Tim Martin, and then the fifth one is actually on the arrest warrants and stuff that were requested and so far ignored. Is Brian Spalding Sr., Brenton's dad, because
His
he
dad.
became the lead conspirator. He was initially working with the police after this happened. And then all of a sudden, one day he turned to the detectives and he said, listen, I'm going to go home tonight. And if I go home and I find out my son's involved, you'll never hear from us again. He went home that night. They never heard from him again. He would not return any emails, phone calls, wouldn't answer the door. And then when they would go out, and he did get kind of caught where they ran into him finally and got him, he said, if you got anything, come arrest us. If not, talk to my attorneys.
Nice.
Yep. So they began, that's what the police are referred to as the wall of conspiracy, because all of a sudden now, Brian Spalding Sr. is organized this situation. He's running the situation. We know other parents were all involved too, because they were fully aware.
How old is the dad of the Spalding Sr.? He's got to be getting up there.
70, I think 76 to 78 now. I think 78, closer to 78.
Okay, so let's go back to that night of the party.
Okay.
And what we know from that night is that Erik left the party and walked home. It was less than a mile from home, correct?
Correct. It was 3/4 of a mile or so from Erik's.
His
the party
plan was to walk, or was that something that happened while he was there?
No. There are several. We're actually going over paperwork the last couple days over the weekend, because there are witness statements, and we just found that we actually pinpointed another lie that we could that stands out from 2002 versus 1983. Erik was his dad didn't know he was going to a party. Erik told his dad he was going to go over to Bill Cook's aunt and uncle's house where Bill was staying, which was near the party area. Erik's parents were new. They didn't know there was a party. Erik said, I'm going to go over to Bill's for a while. And Erik's dad said, we'll be back between 11 and 11:30 because we're going to Detroit tomorrow, which is like a just over 3-hour drive. Mm-hmm. They were going to go to a boat show, boat races and stuff. Mm-hmm. And Erik's dad, Bill Cook, was supposed to go with them, which is another thing that kind of stands out when Bill didn't call in and check the next day, like, hey, Erik, if he knew Erik
are we going? Yeah.
Why didn't he call and say, are we going? So Erik went off on foot, according to his dad. When you listen to Bill Cook and JS number 5, that we don't say his name out loud yet, but they say there's a whole nother story, like they picked him up, gave him a ride, but he was supposed to walk over to meet Bill and go to the party with him. And from there, however everything took place, they ended up at the party about 7:30ish at night. Amber and the younger Spalding sister and younger Spalding brother are there because they rode together to the party. They all were planning to meet at this party, um, and Erik was going with Bill. This was Erik's first real summer party, his first opportunity to meet kids, get to know, maybe meet a girl other than the one that's constantly flirting with him, Amber.
So he didn't have a
And,
girlfriend at the time at the party.
no, no, nope. He did not have a girlfriend at the time. He went there. Everyone that was interviewed said Erik was never a problem, did not pick fights, wasn't part of the whole, because it was a $2 keg party. So the kids literally got a mark on their hand if they paid the $2, which meant they could drink as much as they wanted for as long as they wanted. And they had 3 kegs initially. Then they went and got a 4th keg around 11 o'clock.
Wow,
And
that's
that's
a lot
a
of beer.
lot of beer. Yeah, when they say there was only 50 to 60 kids there, which we already know that's a lie by 2 to 3. So that's a lot of beer. And then Erik was intoxicated. And then apparently at a certain time of night, fights began to break out, of course. Well, you just fueled it with alcohol with a bunch of young,
For sure.
Guys. So they all started getting in fights and stuff. So the party started to get broken up. And parents were kicking people out. The neighbors stepped in to help them. But Erik was never in any of those fights. But Bill Cook was. There were other boys in fights. Brenton was in a fight. They say Brent wasn't even at the party yet. Brent's listed by many witnesses in fights. Even Tim Martin puts Brent in a fight, and then he had to go get him and pick him up around the waist to pull him out of a fight.
Were they trying to get Erik to fight? Do you know that?
Yeah, because there's witness statements that say that when Erik was at the party and everyone was there and everybody was getting along, and then Brent shows up with Tim Martin and
Gets everybody fired up.
Brent starts picking at Erik, okay? Because here's Brett, and he walks up, and he probably just got immediately jealous and pissed off because he walks up to the bonfire, and everybody's sitting around picking tables, lawn chairs around a bonfire, talking and having a good time. And all of a sudden, Brent arrives with Tim, and he sees what? Oh, well, here's his girlfriend, here's his sister, here's her boyfriend, here's his buddy, here's Erik Cross with him. Well, Brent starts calling Erik all kinds of derogatory names for LGBTQ plus. In 83, those words were thrown around a lot easier.
Yeah, they were. Yep.
But Brent, that was his go-to. And he's like, why are you here, Erik? Nobody wants you here. He just harassed Erik and just started shoving him, and everybody was laughing. And I think that's what started a lot of it, was that Brent realized he was getting laughs. He realized that, oh, they think this is funny. And he liked being at the center of attention. He still to this day likes to be the center of attention. There were probably 2 situations, but Erik was walking home, made it to the corner store, which is a little distance, like 3 houses away from that corner store is Erik's house. Country distance. So, just down over the hill, on top of the hills where Erik was before the valley. Erik made it to that store. It's possible they picked him up, they started arguing and fighting in the car, drove him back down. And it sounds like he may have actually been put on top of the car back at Kimball Lake where there was an audience. So Erik got away, went home, was picked up, and of course he sees Bill Cook there. He sees Amber in the car. He's going to trust them, even though Brent's right there nearby. Then they go back, and because there were 2 cars involved. One was the mom's car, and one was a Brenton's car, which should be a 71 Hunter Green Pontiac Le Mans. He made sure he brought that one. Tim Martin was driving around in the Le Mans, according to witnesses later at the party, when Erik was still alive. Erik's mom got home at 1 a.m. She drove in from that direction. She didn't see anything going on. 1:30, about 1:30, the kids are saying there's a fight at the end of the road. We think some of that stuff was made up by the group after the fact to cover for what they all watched. So they will say, oh, there was a fight, but we didn't see Erik, because then Erik's not in the area, but Erik had to walk past exactly where these fights would have been taking place at the end of Kimball Lake Drive. To get to Y Avenue, he had to go past these kids. So they all, and one boy that was actually involved in one of the last fights did say in his witness statement that he talked to Erik as they were walking down towards Y Avenue. So we think that Erik was actually taken back to be humiliated, to be put on display. There is one witness statement that's it's interesting because it's like a 2000 witness statement versus a 1983 witness statement, and it says Brenton made me get on top of the car, get on the hood because I was friends with Erik. Erik was put on top of the car. And I said, well, that's a big difference when you're describing something that's being done. If you were made to get there, then you had to get up on top of the car. But if you were put on top of the car, that means you were physically put on top of it and you didn't climb up there in your own will. Erik was put on the car. Then the car took off. And hood surfing was a big deal back then, but this was not normal
Well,
hood
yeah, I
surfing.
read that they thought it
And,
was hood surfing. I've never heard of that. I'm a little younger than you
oh,
guys. I graduated in
hood surfing.
91, but
Okay.
I had never heard of that.
Well, hood surfing was literally you would stand on the hood of a car like you were on a surfboard. And the car would go fast and you would balance and stuff like you were on a surfboard. But what was done to Erik and Bill Cook was they were sat up there and they were basically holding on for dear life. And Erik didn't have control of what was being done to him, which is why Erik is dead.
Well, and
Because
he's
Erik was
drunk
put up
too.
there
I mean,
after
your inhibitions
well, he
are.
was beat up. Yeah, they beat him up. Brent beat him up at the party, which was part of the beginning of everything. Then he's like, "Oh, it's okay, buddy. We're good. Come on." And he helps him up. Erik couldn't even stand up because they had beat him up at that party. Then he's put on top of the car. Probably Tim Martin and Brenton Spalding with Amber watching. They all get in that car and they take off. And the driver, it's interesting because Bill Cook in a 2000 statement made the statement that the driver took off really fast and then got towards Erik's driveway and slammed on the brakes, which means that they took off from Kimball Lake Drive at like extremely fast, showing off in front of everybody, which more than likely means kids got in cars and followed. Then
And the
they
parents heard the car, right?
Yeah. Well, at 5 a.m., they heard a commotion outside. The dog was barking and stuff at around 1:30. The neighbors and stuff did. But they drove down and hit the brakes, and Bill rolled off to the left, the driver's side of the car then. Erik slid down the hood and went underneath. Well, Erik doesn't have, like Bill, he's awake. He's alert. He's able to push himself off and try not to, fall the wrong way. So he falls off to the left. Erik slides, and many, many statements state Erik slid down the hood. They thought he fell off, is what they try to say, but then they know because they felt him go underneath their feet. So they continued to drive. So they drove with Erik under that car from the Spalding's driveway, or from the Cross's driveway, down that hill, through that valley, down past the swamp. Over 172 feet, Erik's body was dragged underneath that car. So he's underneath the car. You are still gunning the motor. You gun the motor after he's gone under because they slammed on the brakes, which means you're stopped. But then you take off thinking Erik fell and Bill fell. Well, whoever the driver was could see Bill was over here to their left in the gravel in the ditch. But they don't see Erik on the right, but no one seems to care, but they felt. And comments from Amber herself to people over the years are, I will never forget the feeling of him, of him. They will never say his name. I will never get the feeling of him going under my feet. I will never forget the feeling of him going under my feet. Stated very similar. I will never forget the feeling of him going under our feet. Now, if you're talking a 71 Pontiac Le Mans, you have a very low clearance from the bottom of that car to the road. Then you add in 6 to 7 kids' bodies inside that car. Even 3 bodies in that car, but it's Detroit steel. It's a very, very heavy car, very low. Erik was pinned underneath. They dragged him over 172 feet before they stopped.
And then he was dislodged, or did they have to actually?
No, it sounds like that that's the thing. If you drag him for 172 feet and you get out, they knew he came out from behind the car. He came out the back. So they get out and they go back there and they realize what they've done. They see a 16-year-old boy whose clothes are shredded off his body, whose skin is 60% burnt from his body because of blacktop and steel and hot car and body weight and things like that. Erik was literally pinned and just his 60% of his skin was peeled. And then the amount of injuries to Erik's body, not all caused from going underneath a car. But what it sounds like at that point was once Erik came out from behind, they all got out, saw him. There are two witnesses that heard in their words, quote, a hell of a scream, unquote. And they said, but we don't know where it came from, but it sounded off in the distance. And they were in the area. They aren't connected to the party at all. And they said, we heard a hell of a scream.
So do you think that was Amber seeing him?
I do. Either Amber or it could have been Mybra. Because I think out of all of them, she was the only one that possibly may have had a conscience. Because she had made calls from the corner store. She didn't want to be back in the car. And then later she was forced in. But then she becomes part of the mafia family and starts helping with the cover-up because she's protecting herself at that point down the road. But they realize what they've done. They make Bill Cook get in the car and they take off. They leave Erik there in the ditch or in the side of the road. He's down at the bottom of the hill. They didn't attempt to try to take him to the ER, which is 24 hours. They could have just pulled
left him there.
They could have dropped him. They could have, done many things. They could have called 911 because they knew where the payphone was. It was not the store that they'd been sitting at for a couple hours.
Right, even anonymously, this kid's hurt.
Exactly, because back then we didn't have 911, so they literally just had to hit the operator, call it, and they would have maybe known where the payphone was based on the call, the number, and then they could look it up. But they didn't have the technology they had today. Those kids could have literally walked away, but they had destroyed Erik. And even Erik's dad, when he found him at 5:20 that morning, the first thing he told the detective was, look at my son. He was beaten before this happened because look at his eyes. Look at his eye. That eye's from a beating. The injuries to Erik were so extreme and extensive. And even the people in the ER, the autopsy, everybody, they knew that the majority of Erik's injuries were not from that car accident, from that car going over him and stuff. It wasn't an accident.
So his dad found him in that condition. He first saw his shoe.
Yeah. 5 a.m. His parents were woke up by the noisy car in the driveway. They thought, oh, there must be a party somewhere or what is that person doing? They didn't think nothing of it. And then they heard the car pull in their driveway. They backed out and they drove off. So they didn't think nothing of it. And then a couple seconds later, here's the car back in their driveway with the loud muffler and stuff. And they're like, what's going on? So this time they get up and the mom gets up and then they watched the car back out of the driveway again. And the way their house sits, you couldn't see the road. You could just see the top of the car and stuff like that, but they could see him in their driveway. Car drives down. She watches it go down to the neighbors. The neighbor is watching this and he can't figure out what's happening either. He's just like, wow, what's going on with this car? Keeps pulling in my driveway and go back to their house, blah, blah, blah. Then it turns around, comes back, and then it turns around in the driveway again and goes back down to that neighbor's. And as it's pulling in that next time to literally backing up like it's going back up towards Erik's parents' house, they yell out, oh my God, I think he's seen us. And then they crank the wheel and they drive off towards 27th Street and they disappear. Well, Erik's mom and dad, the dad's like, well, I'm up. I'm going to just go get the paper. And, but he walked around the house first because he's like, Erik's still not home. Erik's dad checked the house at 1:30. He checked around the house. He wanted to make sure Erik wasn't locked out. He wanted to make sure Erik wasn't, after they heard the first noise, and he didn't find anything. And so he's like, okay, well, then it must have just been somebody screwing around or whatever. 5 o'clock, he walks around the house again. He doesn't find his kid. He's like, I'm going to go he comes back in the house, makes some coffee, sits there for a minute, which is why it took him until 5:20 to go down to the paper box. Goes to get his Sunday paper, and he sees Erik's shoe in the road at the end of his driveway. He sees something, and I'm imagining at that point he went into shock because his son is laying there, face down, and he sees his son's body, and he's like, what? I think from that moment he just ran over. And he flipped his son over, and Erik was not recognizable at that point because a lot of what's not out there publicly is, when you have an internal decapitation, which Erik had, when the back of your skull is completely gone from being smashed with a metal pipe or trailer hitch, when you have the types of injuries that Erik had just to his head alone and his neck, the amount of blood that will pool, the amount of swelling that just starts immediately. You don't look the same. But he knew it was his son. And, his clothes are,
Was he in the yard or in the
shirt.
road or where
He
was?
was literally they put him in the road. They put him, if you are driving down and Erik's parents' driveway is on the left, Erik was on the opposite side of the road from their driveway, in the road, kind of on an angle. Because when they dropped
That
him out of
makes
the
me
trunk, they backed
sick.
out. Well, they pulled in the driveway, and it looks like maybe brought him out of the trunk, threw him on the ground in the road. Then they drove over him to make it look like a hit and run, because they were setting up their story
So
of
that
hit
was
and
done
run.
after he was deceased?
Yeah, that's the majority of witness statements where people have talked over the years, that
Did
they
the
ran him over.
autopsy determine if there was injuries after the fact or no?
Well, no, because Erik basically suffocated and bled to death internally. He drowned in his own blood, and from his lungs being punctured, his heart being punctured, from ribs that were
Oh
crushed
my
and broken.
God.
So
Horrible.
the timeline of, was this after or was this before? That is so,
Hard to determine.
because, yeah, because when Erik's dad found him in the road and he flipped him over, he's in shock, and he said, one of the things he told the detective was Erik was cold to the touch, and there was only a very tiny, small spot under one of his armpits that was warm. It was 72 degrees at 5:30 a.m. and very humid that day. It was a full moon night, and you were in an area completely surrounded by several lakes, several swamps, several rivers, and you also have cornfields, which hold a lot of moisture. So it was very humid that day, and Erik is cold to the touch at 5:20 a.m.
Mm.
That's how long ago they had killed him, before his dad was able to come and find him.
So that's what I was going to ask you. Like, he left at 1 to go home,
Yep.
but then at 5:30 there's still someone driving around.
Yeah, what according to almost all the witness statements, and the piecing together of individual storylines and stuff, they made Bill Cook get in the car and they took off once they saw Erik come out from behind the car, or from underneath the car and stuff. Panicked, realized that they'd killed him, uh, took off, drove around 3:15, between 3 and 3:30 a.m. is what we can piece together with a new witness statement and some other old ones. They came back and picked up Erik and put him in the trunk of the car, drove him to the Spalding's house. Then they began to clean up items that they had used on him or against him, including the trailer hitch that was the Spalding's trailer hitch and in their car. And they threw the trailer hitch in the trunk in the pond behind the family house, the Spalding family house. That trailer hitch was retrieved by the Michigan State Dive Team in 2000,
Mm.
working with the cold case team out of Kalamazoo. They obviously no DNA after 26, 7 years at that point. But they measured the circumference of the ball. It matches the hole in Erik's back and his spine.
Mm.
That they hit him at some point with that trailer hitch, hitting him so hard with a trailer hitch that it left an indentation that Erik Barrett was buried with. It wasn't coming back out of his back and his spine. It was right above his hip area and his lower back.
Poor guy.
Perfect circle. The thing is, you have a trailer hitch that matches that size. The description of what a lot of people saw that night, watched Tim Martin and Brenton Spalding throw the trailer hitch, take it from the trunk, walk around the house, Spalding's house, throw it to the pond. There were a lot of witnesses. There were more Vicksburg kids out at that area that time of morning at 4 a.m. than have come forward. We know that now. And those people hopefully will go down as conspirators because they've helped keep secrets all these years.
Were there
So
any
we
kids
hope
that
that
told the
many more.
truth? Did anybody come
There
forward and
actually
say,
are, yeah, very few, but there are a few that told the truth that actually matches timelines and matches other witness statements when you puzzle it together. There were a series of polygraphs given throughout this back in
yeah, tell me
'83.
about the investigation. So Erik's dad calls the police and the police come
Yep.
out and this whole thing starts. Were the police dismissive of looking
No,
into it being more than just an accident?
well, the police initially listed it as a hit and run. And the thought process apparently back then was, look, if we list this as a hit and run instead of an intentional murder, homicide, then maybe these kids will feel more comfortable coming forward. They thought that if everybody classified, if the police classified it as a hit and run and quote unquote accident, kids aren't going to be afraid to come forward. They're going to come forward and say, look, okay, it was an accident. They didn't mean to do it, blah, blah, blah. But when you put somebody that's not coherent, not awake, and you put them on the hood of a car, and then you take off like a bat out of hell, and then you do all the stuff you did to cover it up, that's not an accident. It's nowhere near an accident. But they were trying to give these teenagers from Vicksburg, Michigan, an out.
Mm-hmm.
They were trying to give them an opportunity to say, look, if we can get ahead of this, the parents might, I think they were more gearing it towards the parents, saying, look, you don't have to be afraid. Let's go in, let's talk to them, let's tell them this was an accident. This wasn't the intent, blah, blah, blah. And none of them took them up on it. But there
Not even this girl?
No. She was right in there with, I'm going to keep the secret. I almost sometimes think she was the driver of the car, because when Bill Cook in 2000 said, Brent made me get on the hood because I was a friend of Erik's, and they put Erik on the hood, then the driver got in and took off. I'm like, well, why didn't he just say Brent got in and took off? But Amber she's the only one that's semi like functioning on her own. I'm sure she's a high, what do they call it?
High functioning
alcoholic or drunk or addict of some or both. Because I know she likes her steroids and stuff like that. But we also know she drinks, but she could be one of the only ones that are high functioning. She has 2 daughters. She has 3 daughters, actually, because her second husband had a daughter from his first marriage. So she has 3, but biologically she has 2 daughters from her first husband. What's interesting is all of the kids want to blame Erik's army and Erik Cross. The kids of the killers want to blame us for what their parents did. It's our fault that their name is known. It's our fault. And it's like, really? We weren't.
These kids are speaking out about something that happened to their parents when they're in high school.
Yeah, the 2 younger sons of Brenton's have done some stupid things, especially the one that's closest to Brent, that Brent actually, I believe, was living with, or is still living with. That son has threatened Erik's army. He's gone at one time. One of the girls that's a volunteer in Erik's army posted a picture of our billboard that we had up. And it was a picture where we had saved that we recycle everything. So we saved the billboards from the highways and we put them on frames and we take them for our certain events, especially Erik's walk every year in June. Well, she posted a picture of all of us standing in front of the billboard. That's it. She just said, here's the picture. She didn't even put a header on it. He saw it because her Facebook was public at the time, and he threatened her right there on the Facebook. So the police, we have to get screenshots. The police know who it is, which son it is, has, his profile on Facebook and everything.
Sounds like the apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
Not that one. No, there are some circumstances that one is a spitting image of his dad. And in the future, I think he's already headed there. He probably will end up, because I don't think that if you can be the father of small children and everybody in your family knows that Brenton's involved in this, your grandparents are involved in this. And I get not wanting to believe something horrid like this about your dad, but you've grown up under it. You even didn't even go by your dad's last name through school. You went by your mom's maiden name. That kind of tells you something. But Brent really wasn't, he wasn't a father. I mean, he kept women around so that they could raise his kids for him, and then he got credit for it. But Tim wasn't around when his kids were younger. Bill wasn't around when his kids were younger.
So where's Bill now?
Bill lives in Marcellus, Michigan. Doesn't keep his jobs very long.
Did you ever talk to the family? Has he
Erik's family?
Yeah. Did he ever, after this happened, ever reach out being Erik's buddy?
He ended up with Erik's dog, Sally. And there's a picture of Erik in our yearbook in remembrance. And it's Erik with his dog, Sally, in like a black and white photo. And Erik's in a flannel shirt. And then there's a picture of Bill Cook in the exact same pose, exact same black and white, exact same shirt, type of flannel shirt. It's very disturbing. And Bill Cook didn't have a pot to piss in, so the dog went on, and I believe his family made a lot of money breeding that dog, because Erik's parents didn't know Bill was involved. They thought Bill was Erik's friend. They didn't know Bill was.
Was there a funeral and stuff for Erik?
There was a funeral. It was actually held in the Vicksburg High School gym.
Wow.
Because it was so large.
Did those kids come?
Oh, it was quite a scene. So the funeral's happening, and right during the funeral, the parents, of course, are down front. And the funeral home did an amazing job, Rupert Durham back then, making Erik so that they could have an open casket, which was incredible with the amount of damage and stuff.
Wow.
They reconstructed Erik so that his family could have an open casket, which also I think was useful for the police because they needed to see who was coming and what was being said or done.
Yeah.
So even in 80s, even nowadays that's a big thing. So during the funeral, it's very quiet. And there's a song that Erik loved that his little sister Jackie used to play on the piano, which was Stairway to Heaven, Led Zeppelin. Mm-hmm. So they wanted to play this at the funeral because that was Erik's. He would sit and listen to her play that over and over again. So the funeral's going on, and then it's a huge, full auditorium. And then that song starts playing. Well, all of a sudden, two girls just start wailing, just bawling, and heads were turning to find out what is going on. Mm-hmm. And Erik's mom actually stopped and said to her husband, I wonder if is that Erik's, did Erik have a girlfriend? Was that Erik's girlfriend? Because, these two girls were
so upset.
Because they were so emotional. Yeah. And it was quiet. Because you're being respectful, you're listening to the music, and there's going to be cries and stuff like that.
But it was like out of place.
It was like screaming and it was loud, and it made people turn heads. That was how.
If it turned his own mom's head, like she's like, I'm his mom, and I'm not even doing that.
She was down in front, and the girls were up in the back. So afterwards, Erik's mom asked her daughter about it and stuff, and she said, "No, Mom, that was Amber and my Brent." The only people that wailed and did something that was so out of place, I guess, inappropriate, especially coming from them. And of course, Erik's mom didn't know who they were at the time. She thought, wow, that Erik really moved so much. Yeah. She was moved. And then later to find out that they were all involved.
And they were only crying for themselves.
They were exactly that. They were crying for themselves. They wanted, we're the victims. And that's when you know who you're dealing with, what you're dealing with, what kind of individuals you're dealing with, they totally make Erik's murder about them. They're the victims. Their family wants them to be the victims. I get it to a certain point, but after 39 years, I don't anymore. Mm-hmm. I don't get it after the first year. By 84,
these people have had to live without their son and their brother for 39 years. You really can't, you can't put anything on that.
I call it Groundhog Day grief, because when a family loses somebody like this with no answers, they literally go to bed. They've made it through the day. They wake up and they realize every day that he's still gone, every day that he's not coming home, and every day that they don't have any justice. They know all the answers now. So it's like, give them some peace. Erik's dad died in 2007. Erik's dad fought for his son.
His dad passed away. I didn't realize that.
Yep. And his mom is, upper 70s, like the Spaldings. Amber's dad is 86 years old. Wow. And he just recently moved from the house that he built, the house that he was, lived with his wife. She passed away in the house, had both their daughters in the house. He's moved to Connecticut at 86 years old with his older daughter, Amber's older sister. So it's like, why would you need to move somebody at 86 years old? I mean, they're so comfortable there.
Unless he needs a caregiver or something.
Well, apparently his health failed really rapidly. And I think Amber was basically just rubbing her hands together, waiting for the cash.
She's still in Michigan then?
Daughter. She is current. Yeah, she's in St. Joe, Michigan now.
Okay, still on that side of the state. So did Erik's parents at any point of just absolute frustration ever go and talk to these kids' parents or attempt to and say, hey, we just want answers. This is our boy.
Eric's dad did, because Eric's dad called the police weekly, daily, every
Poor
other
guy.
day. He would show up at the sheriff's department. What's going on with my son's case? We're working on it. What's going on with his case? We're working on it. He reached out to Bill Cook and he said, Bill, what he actually, as a matter of fact, the morning that Eric's dad found him, the ambulance shows up. The neighbors were out helping. The ambulance puts him in. Now, this was back in '80, so no 911. And when Eric's mom ran next door to have the neighbors come and help, because neighbors were like all hospital employees, so they had ways to help, CPR, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
They knew when they first arrived, there's no sense, he's gone, but they kind of went through some motions for his parents' sake. The ambulance arrives, and when the neighbor called, they said, well, the ambulance was already called. So somebody had already called an ambulance, but they don't know who, because they don't keep those kinds of records back then, or they didn't. Then Eric's mom rode to the hospital, but Eric's dad insisted on staying. He said, you go with Eric. I'll come in a little bit. He said, I want to talk to the police. So Eric's dad goes in the house while he's waiting for police to arrive because it wasn't the Vicksburg cops, even though they would have been 5 minutes away. The ambulance was from Vicksburg, but it had to be the sheriff's office that came out. So you had to come from Kalamazoo. So you're a little over 30 minutes away, driving all the way out there on Kimball Lake Drive and Y Avenue, or Y
Wow.
Avenue in Vicksburg. And so they're waiting for the police. So Eric's dad went in the house and he called to talk to Bill Cook right then. And he told Bill, I just found Erik, what happened last night. And Bill right then started lying. He was at Spalding's house with Brent, Amber, Tim, Mybrit, all of them. And he took the first call from Eric's dad there. So Eric's dad must have got his uncle and said, did Bill make it home? No, he's not here. He's probably out. His girlfriend's calling him there. Eric's dad calls. Eric's dad goes out. Bill goes, I don't know. He was walking home. I got beat up. And Bill starts making it about himself with Eric's dad, because Eric's
Did
dad's
Bill have
statement to the
injuries?
police, he had injuries because of what happened to him. He got in a fight, but
Mm-hmm.
then he had road rash and stuff on his legs. And as far as I know, the police, they took pictures of that, but he wore pants and a long sleeve to the police station so that they couldn't see the marks on his body. Other people, witnesses around him said, oh yeah, he was all road rashed up, which shows you, yes, he did go off the side of a car. He did end up, he didn't get the road rash he had on his thighs and stuff from a little fist fight at the end of a dirt road. It didn't
Right.
happen
That
like
doesn't
that.
make sense.
So, yeah, so the 83 cops, that's part of the problem right there too.
Yeah.
But Eric's dad tells the detective introduces himself. Eric's dad walks out of the house, walks down the driveway. It's 6:10, it's 6 between 6:10 and 6:15. The detective just got the call from another detective at the Vicksburg hospital that said Erik had been pronounced deceased at 6:10 a.m. Eric's dad walks up to the detectives, introduces himself. The detective says who he is, and he said, have you been in contact? Do you want to go or have you been in contact with the hospital? And he says, no, not yet. I just went and called Eric's friend Bill because he went to the party with him last night. But I don't know, I haven't heard from Bill or anything. And he says, well, I need to tell you that your son has passed away. And he goes, do you want to go be with your wife? And Eric's dad, being ahead of the game back then. You got to understand, a man in shock, and he just sent his son off. And in his mind and his heart, I think he knew, but he was still in shock. And he said, I do, but I want to talk to you first. That's why I stayed. And he said he started telling him everything that he remembered seeing when he walked down the driveway. He gave him a detailed thing.
Right.
He said, you need to pick up. And he made sure that they picked up things that were on the road that the cops initially weren't even looking at picking up. He's like, no, you need to make sure that that's picked up. And then he told him about the
Yeah. They need to
car.
get
He said,
everything.
oh yeah. And he told him, I just got off the phone with his friend. He went to that party last night with his friend. The friend was supposed to come here and go to the boat show with us this morning. So that is why Bill Cook didn't need to call and ask about going to the boat show, because Bill Cook was told by Erik Cross's dad at 6 a.m.
That he was
that Erik
dead.
Cross was dead. But when you read Bill Cook's witness statements, Bill Cook said, my uncle called me at such and such, 7:30, 8 o'clock. Oh, Brent told us at 9. All of those kids have lied in every witness statement, because we know for a fact that Erik's dad told Bill, who was with all of them. So, he hung up the phone and said they found him. So now we got to get ready for what's happening next.
And they were all still together at this point?
Yep, they were all at the Spalding's house all together.
Unbelievable. So
Yep.
did the cops put pressure on these kids? You said there were polygraphs given.
there were polygraphs given. Now Amber, now she's at the party, she's in the car, she's rumored by everybody all the way through, and she ends up not even getting interviewed until her very first interview was in December 5th, I think it was December 5th, 1983.
Wow. So like
Yes,
6 months later.
Then around either December 5th or December 8th, I got to double check the date, but 6 months later.
They didn't even talk to
Now,
her till then.
no, ma'am.
And she's there
Never,
when this
never
kid's
approached.
found dead with road rash and tons of
Everybody
injuries.
at the party puts her in the center, in the front seat with Brent and Tim running over Erik, and this is all three of them are the main three killers, and she's not interviewed for 6 months.
Unfortunately, this is, like you said, a sign of the times then.
Oh yeah. Well, and they're looking at little 15-year-old girl. She turned 16 November 15th of 83.
Little blonde girl.
She goes in, little blonde girl, little white blonde girl. That's that whole syndrome.
Yeah, they always get the free passes.
They get the free passes and they get the most coverage when they're missing.
They sure do.
And and then you got all these boys that get squat.
We just covered a case of a 16-year-old. It's crazy because it happened out in California. She went to a party and was missing. They ended up finding her car and her inside the car in a reservoir where the party was. And then it's weird because we covered this and we're still waiting for the autopsy for toxicology and all that. But pills are rampant in that area where this happened. And then I'm scrolling through my YouTube and then Erik Cross comes up. So I watched it again, the True Crime Daily. I hadn't seen that whole thing. That was that was a beautiful show.
I mean, Anna just did an amazingly
really was.
Thing.
And I watched that in its entirety and I thought, you know what? All these people are going on YouTube, these podcasts about Kylie, this 16-year-old. She's been found. She's been located. It's not what everybody wanted to hear, but at least her parents have closure and answers somewhat. Mm-hmm. And then I'm like, these people 39 years.
First, you've known since day one.
Me?
Everyone has been involved.
Oh, yeah. Like you guys have had known who was there, who did what, and nothing. So what can we do to help Erik's army? Like what now is your goal? What is your...
So Amber goes in and she takes a polygraph. She fails a polygraph because her parents had to sign for everything because even though she turned 16 in November, she's still a minor. So her parents had to give permission for the interview. They had to give permission. So at the same time, when you're a minor, your parents are getting all the updates too, as if they were in the room, but they separate them. They do all the questioning. She fails they tell her that they know that there's more to the story and that her story doesn't match. And yet, in certain cases, they all had an exact, I mean, literally like they went in and read from a script, exact story. So somebody wrote that for him, which is probably the conspirator, Daddy Spaulding. So Amber comes back. She takes her first polygraph in December of 83, fails it. They tell her, you failed your polygraph. She says, well, then, so she says, well, okay. They go, is there anything you need to tell that you want to add? So she starts telling them things that she lied about. Then Amber's given a total of 3 polygraphs at different times.
3?
She fails all 3. 3. Bill Cook was given 1 polygraph. Now, when Amber failed her first polygraph, her mother said, well, the machine was broken. It's okay. The machine was broken. And I'm like, lady, really? Come on. That's where the family starts, putting the blinders on and saying,
my little girl couldn't have done this.
Yeah, my little girl. Yep. Then Bill Cook takes and fails his 1 polygraph because he was in and out of jail for a bunch of other things, crimes, robbery, and things like that. Domestic violence seems to be his and Brenton's go-to when, whenever they want to, whenever they can't handle a situation, they just beat their way out of it. And no one ever follows through on their cases. Brenton's aggravated stalking, 3 years in prison, was the first and only since 1983 that he's ever been actually held accountable for. Everything else is 4 hearings and out. He knows how to play the game. He knows how to work the system. And Kalamazoo, Michigan has a program, I can't remember, I think it's called EOC, that is basically the no cash bail system that they've been putting together for the entire 12 years that we've been following Brenton and Bill Cook and Tim Martin through the Kalamazoo justice system, or Just Us system. And then, so he's had that luxury of, you slap on the wrist and move on, and he's fine with it. He laughs. He doesn't take anything serious. So Tim Martin took 3 polygrams failed, or they called them polygrams back then. Polygraphs failed them all. Every question about Erik Cross. And they literally asked some of the most basic questions. Do you intend to lie to me? No. Do you know about Erik? Do you know what happened to Erik Cross? No. I mean, the questions are all the same for each of the polygraphs, and then they got more in detail with each one. Not one of the killers could pass a polygraph about Erik Cross in that night. Brent and Spalding took a polygraph in 2000, I believe it was 14, February, around Valentine's Day. Maybe it was 2005. It was early 2000, so it wasn't 14. It was earlier than that. And he failed. And the questions were strictly about Erik Cross, and he failed. And then he took off to somewhere, Colorado. There was a cold case subpoena issued for Bill, Brent, Tim, and Amber in 2000. They went under subpoena and they all lied. Brent didn't show up, took off to Colorado with his last wife because he was afraid that he was going to go to prison.
Is this when the DA said there wasn't enough evidence for charges?
No, that was in 2007.
Okay. Go ahead.
So yeah, there was a cold case team in the late 90s, 2000s, and then as they're ready to basically shut this case and put them all in prison, they get them under subpoena and everything, and then all of a sudden the funding disappeared for the cold case unit in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and everything stopped again. That was 2000. 2000 from like 2000 to 2002 up to 2004, and then it was gone. Case went back, got dusty and sitting in a box, and then
and Erik's dad witnessed all this.
Erik's dad lived through all this, and I believe the man died from a broken heart early, and just his heart was crushed by the justice system. Yeah. So listen, though, there was a young man that was taken. He was friends with Amber. He was a major witness in this case. He gave a full 8-page handwritten testimony. When I reread it after the police rewrote it, it was much shorter. These are the police in 83 and 84. This young man was kind of held against his will at some point. There's kidnapping in this case from other people because they were afraid they were going to talk. So Brent and Spalding and another relative of Tim Martin's were supposedly holding kids hostage, or held a boy against his will and kidnapped him, locked him in a closet, threatened to kill his girlfriend or a friend that was a girl. There's all kinds of drama. Oh yeah, there's all kinds of drama, and that's part of that fear buildup that they were trying to keep kids scared.
Mm-hmm.
So when this boy, his dad made him go in. Brenton's dad went to the home where this boy was staying while his dad was out of town, and had a lengthy conversation with him privately with a minor. His future brother-in-law and his sister let him go in a room by himself with Brian Spalding Sr. Brian Spalding Sr. says, listen, you're going to have to testify. You're going to have to show up in court. You're going to have to go against Brent. I will talk to the police. I'll take care of everything. I'll make sure that, you never have to see it inside of a courtroom. The kid trusts this guy because he's a parent and he's a dad, and the family knows him. And then his dad said, no, you're going to go down. So his own dad took him down and had him go in, and they did polygraphs on him. He's the only one in this case that's passed a polygraph.
Wow. The only one?
Ma'am. Only one out of the people that have given those types of statements. So if you take the killers, all 4 of the killers that are still alive
they've
took
all
and failed polygraph about Erik Cross. Strictly about Erik Cross. There were no other questions except about Erik Cross. The young man that gave his full testimony had no reason to lie, gave detailed information. Brent admitted he killed Erik to him. Then he said, I don't want to tell you because then I'll have to kill you. Gave detailed information. They gave him polygraphs. I believe he took 3 as well, but he took polygraphs and passed them. He did not fail anything, but yet none of that has moved forward. Then it was, the excuse I was always given is, well, it's going to be he said, so it's him against them. And I'm like, it's him against Brenton. Oh, well, what about his dad? Well, then, so now you got the dad who ran interference for his son. Then what they did was they scooped up Brent and they hid him away at a mental hospital in Kalamazoo when this was all going on, so the police couldn't interview him. And then it actually is so disgusting. In the notes, it says from 83, this was in November 31st, December 1st of 83 is when it started, and then it went over past midnight. And it says something to the effect of, Brenton Spalding is currently residing in such and such facility in Kalamazoo, Michigan. Follow-up will be necessary once he's released.
Never
Case went
happened.
dead. No, ma'am. So it was all set up. But Brenton wasn't crazy until after they killed Eric Cross. And then he became crazy. He became Jesus Christ and crazy and all this. It was all an act. And the police actually have him on recording saying it was an act and that he can do it again if he needs to, Daddy. Him and his dad. So his dad knows that the police know it was an act. The police can prove it's an act. The police know that money has changed hands in this case over the years. And then it's interesting to me because I am looking at a wrongful death suit that took place in 84, started in 83, because the parents were like, you know, the insurance and stuff and funeral and all that. So they sued the party throwers, the family that threw the party. And, you know, because it was 83, things were different back then than it is now. They could actually go after every one of the killers at this point and just take them all down. I wish they would, but they want to get the arrest and prosecution more than anything else. And so I find it interesting that the Kalamazoo detective that led Erik's case in 83 from day one, he could give information to the family's attorney and detective so that they can interview witnesses and things. And they have witnesses that they don't have witness statements from for their own department. And I question, why would the detective give them? So my thought was, did they figure in their head, oh, well, you know what, we'll let the family win a wrongful death suit, they'll get some money, we'll make it go away.
All go away.
Guess what? It did. Yeah, and the family that threw the party claimed they didn't know who Brenton Spalding was. They didn't see him that night.
How convenient.
Yeah, because their son was at Brenton Spalding's house buying drugs on Friday night before his party. The son invited Brenton and them all to the party. The son graduated with Brenton from high school, and they all shared community friends. And, you know, when you come from a small village of Vicksburg or any village or any small community that you've grown up around the same kids, you know each other. Now, were they best of friends? Yeah, they were. They were close. They spent time together and they partied together. And that's why this all took place. So for his family and it was his mom and his stepdad and his stepbrother, who actually also went to Vicksburg and knew Brenton, they go to court and they're like lying on the stand in this wrongful death suit. But the Crosses won, which is a little, you know, back then, no consolation. I mean, your child is gone. They don't get him back. What they wanted was somebody to be held accountable. And the Kalamazoo County Sheriff's Department helped them prepare the case for that wrongful death suit while they're doing their own interview. And yet they don't ask about the case when it's done. They don't pull up any of the paperwork. They don't go to the family. They don't go to the judge. They
just wanted it to go away.
They wanted it to go away.
So they thought that the family would feel vindicated by this civil suit.
I really, honestly, my gut tells me yes. I think that was the situation. I think that they set it up. So they're like, look, I think the Good Old Boy group was so so wrapped around this case so much back then in Vicksburg. We know it was in Vicksburg, that in the 80s, the Good Old Boy group said, listen, you've got X amount of teenagers here that are just starting out. You can't bring that kid back. Let's give them a wrongful death suit. Maybe the families chipped in and reimbursed that family for what they lost, because I'm sure they couldn't get insured for a while, and they were business owners. Conveniently, Brian Spalding was a business owner. Amber's dad was his own business owner and worked for the school board at this time. Tim Martin's dad was a preacher in Portage and then moved to Vicksburg to get his kid out of the area. So he had a lot of connections to a lot of business people and cops and stuff in the 80s. Tim's dad even went so far to start counseling through his church. He voluntarily went and worked for the Kalamazoo County Sheriff's Office after Erik was murdered and counseled boys just like his own, but he couldn't do anything with his own. So he counseled boys that were in trouble. Yeah, afterwards. And look what police department he's working with, the Kalamazoo County Sheriff's Department.
Wow.
Then you've got Bill Cook's dad. So he was nothing. He was just like his son. So that's nothing there.
Is he still alive?
No, he's deceased as of 2 years ago now. Last year? Within the last 2 years. Yeah.
So how is Erik's sister and mother doing? And what is their like, where are they at with this whole thing? Have they accepted that most likely they're not going to get the justice that they've been looking for?
No, they hold out the hope. They know what we do for them. I communicate with Jackie, and I communicate with her mom, or with Erik's mom. Um, there come a point where this is so draining, and Jackie has 5 small sons
Oh,
and an older
wow.
daughter. Yeah, and she was homeschooling, and she's a online professor, teacher type thing.
Wow. Busy, busy,
So
busy
she,
lady.
yeah, and this literally just zaps your strength, zaps
I
your
can
your
imagine.
will. And whenever she got her hopes up, and then back in 2019, she had her hopes up. The AG was involved with the case. And when she took office, she got the case from Kalamazoo. We got it
Everybody was
taken out
so
of the
hopeful, right? That something was
well, and
finally going
the
to
case was
happen.
done. The case was done. Amber went in there and she said, I want a deal. I don't want to serve one moment in jail. I want a deal. And then I'll tell you everything you need to know or you want to know. They said, okay, tell us what you can tell us, and then we'll let you, we'll agree upon it. She told them everything about the case, everything that took place. And then they said, okay, we just have to take this in front of a seated judge in, I believe, Ingham County. They took it to the judge. The judge approved it completely. They called Amber in to sign it. Amber walked in with her same attorney and said, I'm going to plead the fifth. And they're like, what? This case would have been over as of the end of probably like October,
Who
because
got to her, you
November,
think?
December. Well, there's so many possibilities, because what the police and other attorneys and stuff say is either there's a couple things. Either there was somebody in her world that was not covered by this deal, that it would not protect, and more than likely it was her dad, because he was part of the parental cover up. They
Hmm.
all had to be in part of that. And so maybe, Brian Spalding Sr. or someone came up and said, listen, I'll take your dad down with me if I go. And that's got to be the easiest thing for them to do, which would have probably garnered Amber some more money from her poppy to keep her mouth shut. Because I think there's like possible blackmail on all sides of this, on these, from Amber to her own family, for the money, because she is a greedy, greedy witch. Um, the other thing was either ineffective counsel, like it's not a trial lawyer that she's got, maybe, and just your typical shady bus bench lawyer kind of guy. Um, the other one was that she wasn't completely truthful, and that somebody said, listen, or what our guess is she went back and told, Brent and Bill, hey, especially Bill, her and Amber and Bill talk quite a bit, apparently.
Still?
Um, Still, they keep very close, and they got to keep in communication, even though they don't have anything in common in their
Just
worlds.
because of
They've
this.
got to keep, because they've got to make sure what's going on, what's Brent doing, what's Tim doing, what's Bill doing, what's Erik's Army doing. When that Crime Watch Daily episode aired, that afternoon around 5 o'clock, a van from rusty old van pulls up in the driveway of the apartment complex Bill Cook's living at, and it pulls in and it goes around a sheriff's car. The sheriff's there talking to Bill Cook in the driveway. The neighbors notice this van pulls back, like they live there, but they didn't recognize it, because they're all like, everybody in the neighborhood's checking out. Why is there cops next door talking to the guy we just saw on television?
Hmm.
And I think it was that day or the very next day. It must have been the next day. They gave Bill overnight to kind of think about it, and then they went out to talk to him. And as the deputy's talking, or the detective's talking to him in the driveway, this guy walks up and introduces himself to the neighbors, Tim Martin. He says, yeah, hi, I'm Tim. He goes, I just came to talk to Bill. And she goes, well, he's been talking to the cop for a few minutes. Some of the neighbors were standing there, and he goes, yeah, I figured I better come and talk to him, make sure he doesn't do anything to incriminate himself. Those witnesses have talked to the detectives. That's in there. They got Tim Martin's coming to see Bill Cook right after this Crime Watch Daily episode airs.
Like,
And
oh
here we sit.
shit.
Yep. He's covering his ass. To use the words, I want to talk to my buddy. I ain't seen him in a long time. I want to make sure he doesn't say anything that'll incriminate himself. That's kind of an odd word to use. Just I would just check it on
You
him, make
didn't
sure
do
he's okay. I
anything.
saw
There's
this
no
thing. Yeah.
incriminating.
What do you gotta how would you
If you're
incriminate
innocent,
yourself?
you're
It's
not going to be
something
incriminating yourself. Wow.
right on. So did I forget, what else did you ask me?
Just
Um
where do they stand with everything, and what is your guys' goal?
Still active. Well, we've had actually several new witnesses come forward already again this year.
From the party?
From the party, from right after the party, connected to individuals involved, because a lot of it is, it's sad to say, but sometimes people have to have their feet put into the Cross family shoes to understand the pain and to make a statement or to make them come forward. In some cases,
it's kind of amazing that people need to I mean,
to need that motivation
to do the right thing.
But you know what? Even good people will say, I don't want to get involved. Well, like, look, if you know any of this, you're involved. They made you involved. I would be pissed if they put me in the middle of anything anyway, even if it's the minute, most minute piece of information.
Me too. Because you can't unsee it and you can't forget it.
Well, and that's the thing. That's why we use Erik's posters with his face. That's his 10th grade school picture, his last one alive.
That's what he looked like.
That's what he looked like. And you get those taken typically fall or spring, but I think that was spring for us that year. So that's his end of school year picture in 10th grade. That's what he looked like. So we use that. We don't use anybody else's picture because this is about Erik. This is about what happened to that boy at this party, after this party, during this party, everything. And since this party. The case, when the AG did not close the case, unfortunately, the local media, which can suck at times, said, oh, the AG's closed the case, said there's no. Now, the AG, remind me to go back to the prosecutor because I want to tell you what was done there and why. Actually, I should do that first. So the prosecutor got Erik's case. He worked weekly and biweekly. He had meetings weekly and biweekly with the Kalamazoo County Sheriff's Office. They did everything that he wanted them to try, even if they didn't like the idea, whatever. Same thing. They tried everything they wanted to try, even if he didn't agree with it or like the idea, but they tried it. They got all the stuff done that they wanted to get done. He said, the case is ready. Write it up. Present it to me. They did exactly what they were told to do. They wrote it up. They presented it to him. They gave it to him, and they gave it to him. And he had it for 1 full month before they made it public that they gave it to him. So from September, say, 6th to October 7th, he's got the case. He's supposed to be getting everything ready. They're ready to do a big thing.
And they're like, let's give him a chance, right?
Yep. So Amber gets wind that they're going to do a media blitz on this. She knows because we've been putting it out there because we wanted her to know this.
You want that pressure, right?
Yes, exactly. So she comes into the Kalamazoo prosecutor's office with her attorney, gets an assistant prosecutor apparently, goes into the office, and he says to her, because it's right before an election for the prosecutor, well, I can't put you in the car. And Amber and her lawyer look at each other like, what? And he says, I can't put you in the car. Now, mind you, they have everything. They put them in the car. They've put themselves in the car in their own witness statements and their other people's witness statements.
How do they figure they can't put them in the car then?
Well, it was right before an election and they wanted this case to go away. And so they get up and leave. She's ready to get a deal back in 2017. They get up and leave. The prosecutor takes the case and sits it aside. Won't talk to the family, won't give any updates, won't talk to the Kalamazoo County Sheriff's Department, won't talk to the Detective Sergeant Madison on the case. He couldn't get a return phone call from the prosecutor's office. He couldn't get a return email from them. And I'm like, how do you not return calls to your police force? That to me right there shows a lot of, the behavior alone is disrespectful on top of everything else.
Why is that acceptable?
Working other cases for this guy. Right. So then I start calling up to Schuette's office, Governor Schuette's office, back when he was AG, before Nessel. And we're pushing. We're going to public events that he's doing, his little handshake and, flesh press, these pressers that he's doing, everything out around the area. We're showing up with our banner. We're trying to get to talk to him. We do a public event where the sister and the family write a letter to him. We walk to the post office. She mails it on camera with the local media there. Schuette gets it. He blows it off because it was election. Schuette loses. I reach out. I'm like, well, screw it. If Schuette's going to be gone, I'm going to reach out to them and say, what about this new person coming in? Like one of the rumors was that Erik was murdered because he was gay. That's what Brent said to people. Well, that kid was gay, right? Well, okay, so you committed a hate crime is what you're saying?
So that makes it okay? What an ass.
Yeah, that makes it okay. Amber said, well, that kid was gay, right? So it's like, wow. So these two peas in a pod who were very close even after the murder, kept seeing each other behind everyone's back.
So
And that
that's
came out
how
in the
they
pod.
sickly justified.
Yes.
Oh my God, that
Two,
makes it
two,
even
four,
worse, Missy. That
two
makes it
different
even
witness
worse.
statements. Yeah. Total of four witness statements at least. And two different times, Amber and Brent, two different types of statements, both of them gave to different people saying, well, that kid was gay, right? So that was their excuse. So my thought was, wow, you know what? You got an LGBTQ plus individual that's very open coming into office. Maybe she will do something and move some
Yeah,
mountains.
maybe
Maybe
she'd
she's going
like
to be
to
good.
know those comments that were made
Yeah,
by
so
you.
maybe she'll do this.
Yeah.
And we didn't push that because you know what, in fairness, Erik was flirting with girls, so how is it? I don't know how Erik was gay, but I think
But
just
even if
because
they're
of
going to
Erik
use
was
that, who cares? Use it
then go
against
for it.
them, right? They're being the bigots.
We're told right off the bat, well, hate crimes are very hard to prove. I said, really? So when they say, well, that kid's dead because he was gay, that's not good enough to say it's a hate crime. But Amber obviously has issues with people from that community. Brenton Spalding has issues with people that community because I think Brenton is actually a hidden member of that community, is why he has problems with boys from that community. But so the case stalls and the cops can't get responses and the family's not getting updates. And then all of a sudden I get a hold of them, and the sheriff and the new attorney general had worked on something together. They spoke. I got it through Grand Rapids. Grand Rapids is like, yes, we're aware of the case. They can bring us the case. I said, what do you mean? Yeah, they can bring us the case. And I said, I'm not. I said, please don't even joke with me. I said, I'm going to hang up the phone from you and I'm going to call the police and I'm going to tell them you guys can take the case to him. You don't have to work around. You don't have to deal with being ignored by the Kalamazoo, Michigan prosecutor anymore and his office. Within a short amount of time, then she said, hold on to it until I take office. They took it up to her on January 3rd. From that moment on, boom, her office, not her. She doesn't do anything with it. They had it ready to go, but she was aware of it. They had it ready to go by the fall. Amber's on board. Amber's taken a full immunity deal. And then by January, it's all over
done.
Again. So yeah, so the problem was a lot of the media covered it wrong. They said it was closed. What was told to the Kalamazoo County Sheriff's Department was this: we're bringing you the case back. So basically, we got to have you rebuild a few things to fix the mistakes that were just made yet again. But when the Attorney General's office had the case, one of the things that they did notice was that for the prosecutor in Kalamazoo to have Erik Cross's case with the warrants ready to be signed by him, that he worked with them for over a year on to get ready and told them it was ready to go. Send it to me. They did everything they were supposed to do. The police did. He had made two notations in the margin of Erik's case file in those 7.5 months. That's it. Because once they made the case go away yet again, like everybody in 83 and 84 did, then they're not going to talk to anybody. It's going away until after elections. Here we are rolling into another election. And the case is back in the AG's hands because of the witnesses that came forward this year. And proof.
So you've got new statements coming in.
Yeah. And this time we have proof that money changes hands. We have proof. And there's some such simple things that could actually be done. You watch one episode of Cold Justice and you can see they ping a phone. Well, guess what? They could ping several phones right now and prove, okay, these guys are constantly around each other. These guys are in contact with each other. So the case right now was in the hands of the Kalamazoo County Sheriff's Department. It still is with the detectives there. They have a new person. I don't know if it's a captain or detective sergeant, but they have a new man in charge now as of just the last few months that's overseeing the detectives. Apparently the detectives weren't getting support again. They didn't have someone that was very strong in their department helping them or holding them, their feet to the fire. And that's changed again. So hopefully that's another improvement that's made,
good for you guys for staying on top of this for so long.
Yeah. And all we want, honestly, is Erik to have his fair chance at justice. We spread awareness. We keep pushing. We keep begging people to come forward. I mean, when you literally 39 years, we're rolling in 39 and a half years now. June 26th next year will be 40 years ago that Erik Cross was murdered. All of Erik's witnesses in this case, they're aging. We want peace for Erik's mom. You don't get closure because you don't get your child back. But what we want is Erik's mom to know we did everything we possibly could do for her son and for her family. in honor of both her son and her husband.
It's so
And in
nice
her
of
honor
you
as
to
well.
keep that torch going, because as a mom, I have 2 boys myself, and if something like this happened to one of my boys, I can't even imagine. But to feel so alone and like not know what to do, and especially back then, there's no resources back then for people,
Well,
and
the no resources and being new to the community, and all these other people were born and raised there.
right, they're all like connected and
Oh
and
yeah, and they were tightly
good
connected
old
because
boys, and you're the
the
outsider.
renters did. Oh yeah, well that's the thing. It's like, I think too, it's that whole head in the sand kind of ostrich type
Hmm.
picturing thing, because even good people can hold on to evidence and information because they just don't want to get involved. And
Yeah,
it's like when you physically walk up and say, "Hey, Jay, I hear you are aware of this." Yeah, but I just didn't want to get involved. It's like, okay, literally, I ask you point blank. So do I have to literally go around and ask the other 120 kids that were at this party,
right,
"Hey, Scooby, were you at the
right,
party that night? Did you witness a fight? Did you witness them put Eric on the car?" And some of these kids, literally, I tell everybody every week when we talk on Thursday night, it's a puzzle. And every piece is important to a puzzle, because if you're missing one piece, you never get a complete puzzle.
yep,
And every piece matters to putting the big picture together. Otherwise, you just have a bunch of cardboard laying there with colorful, color on one side and blah on the other side.
right. And it
Every
doesn't
piece
doesn't tell
matters.
a story.
Take
So
this person says, "Well, I didn't think that'd be important," or "No, they never came to talk to me, and I waited for them to come and talk to me." It's like, no, no, no. Take the initiative and go talk to them. Because if this was your child, would you be happy if I sat back and just said, "Well, if the cops come and talk to me, then
right,
I'll
right.
take
And a
them."
lot of people do that. A lot of people are like,
People
well, the
do.
cops
It's
haven't
just,
asked me nothing, so
well, yeah, and
I
they'll
must not be
support us
important.
until the end of the earth. Yeah, they'll stand right beside us in front of Eric's billboard and pose with us and say, "I'm right there with you." They'll give money. And it's like, you know what? I would rather you give me a small
Information.
statement than a dollar. I don't even want a penny from you if you can give us information. And what we've actually been able to do over the years, in the last 3, 4 years especially, but even this year, we've been able to take this person's tiny little thread of information and mix it with 3 other people, and then say, "Oh my gosh, look, there's your thread of truth in every lie." They actually just put together the piece of the timeline that's been missing
Right.
for 39 years.
Wow, that's crazy. So
Yeah,
everybody matters. Everybody who has any kind of
everybody
information or
mattered.
who was
I
there.
don't care. Yeah. I mean, if the kids came, and because apparently these kids had a lot on their heads, and when they all started, when they separated them all and they started going in different directions and stuff, these kids needed sounding boards from other people. So over the years, they've shared this, because up until year 26, they thought they got away with it. But you know what? In fairness to their brains never let them forget. That's why they drink. That's why they do
Right,
drugs.
right.
Because when we started using Eric's poster, all of a sudden you had new arrests for Brent, new arrests for Bill. You had Tim getting in trouble. You had people, Tim having mental breakdown.
Yep.
Bill Cook, attempted suicide along the way. A lot of kids that were
Wow.
at the party have committed suicide.
That's a lot to
That's
carry
because,
around. I don't know
yeah, even if you just
how
witnessed
it's
it,
even
it's
worth
like
carrying around,
26 years of I didn't do anything. And now all of a sudden we bring it back out and we put his face out there.
And all of a sudden
Now
you
they're
start
like,
seeing all these things
they're
happen.
haunted by it. They're haunted by it. Yeah. I mean, and we've had a lot of vandalism over the years, and that's finally subsided, of our posters and things. Brenton's sons would steal the posters. They even took Eric's posters. I got a bigger one. This is a big version of it, but they would take Eric's poster, and they would take him down off the poles in Kalamazoo. They would take him home, and they would make a little strip on their computer, and they would glue it or tape it right over here that said "Justice for Brenton" on Eric's poster. And
Sick.
then they would take the time to put them back up on the telephone poles.
Wow. I have no words
His
for
blood.
someone
Oh,
like that, like people
there
like
were
that.
some young little, yeah, there were some little young little girls that were walking around with grocery sacks, the little plastic grocery sacks around Kalamazoo, around the Woodward
And grabbing
neighborhood and
them.
other places, taking them down. And somebody approached them and said, "What are you doing?" And they said, "We get paid by the grocery sack full." So Brian Spalding Sr. was paying kids to take down Eric's posters. And I'm sure what he was doing was hiring little kids from the neighborhood, because
Hey,
then
you
he
want to make
figured,
some
oh,
extra money? Go take down all
you
these
want to make
posters,
extra
kid.
money, it doesn't come back to us, which it did because they told us who was paying them. And then and we told the police who was paying them. But then also, you're not going to go after a minor. So they were actually using people's kids in Kalamazoo
Sick.
neighborhood because they have rental properties. They
To
have,
keep this covered up.
all kinds of, yeah, to keep this covered up. I mean, to take down this kid's poster and nothing, and this is an old one because it says the detective, now it says Kalamazoo Sheriff, but this is a very big version of our normal posters. To take down that kid's poster, to take it home,
Change
this is a
it.
small one, to literally cover up the barcode and everything and put your own sticker over that says Justice for Brenton. We actually have, I think it was Fox 17 that came down and covered that for us. And it stopped. But
So they put them on the carpet.
Yeah, they did. And then when we gave them a bunch of the posters, we sent a bunch of the adjusted posters into the police because then they can get fingerprints and stuff from that. We have pictures of different, this one young man, black hair and glasses, or black hair and mustache and stuff, riding his bicycle around stealing posters.
Wow.
And we knew who that was. It was just sad because it was like, wow, you're corrupting more kids. Brian Spalding Sr. and the Spaldings corrupting more kids to keep covering up their lie.
To hide things from authorities.
Yeah. And you know what's really sad is Spaldings could have thrown their own son under the bus and just said, you know what? He did this. He needs to pay for this. He needs help. Whatever they wanted to throw under there and pretend. But instead, they would rather destroy their entire family and have this become generational because it's going to go with their grandkids next. And, you know, it's even funnier. It's even like not funny, but sick because Brenton's daughter, he has one daughter and 4 sons, married into the family of one of the guys that is a witness against Brenton. And that is so disturbing on so many levels because it's like, wow, how does that happen? And you know,
how are those family get-togethers?
Well, yeah, because I'm thinking,
can you imagine? Like, yikes.
There's no forks and knives at those tables.
Right.
And, you know, you just wonder, like, did they lie to those kids that much and keep that a secret? I know in certain cases for the Spalding sons or some, you know, along that line, they didn't even tell their kids until they got older. But this girl knew. She knew what her last name meant in Vicksburg because, you know, even back then when these kids were going through in the late early and mid 90s and stuff, but 2000s, there's internet there. And they got to just look up their dad once and there's pages and pages. And that's the other thing too. We wanted to make sure that we spread awareness and we keep this out there publicly because you know what? This is going to be the shame of Kalamazoo. This is going to be a shame of Vicksburg. This is going to be a shame of those families. And it's going to go with their kids, their grandkids, and their great-grandkids.
Yeah, that's their legacy, right?
That is their legacy that they have passed on. You know, they think it's going to be money, and they're all greedy. There's a money factor.
It's a really, really sick secret that they're keeping.
It is a sick, very sick, disturbing thing. And the fact that you would, you know, I'm thinking to myself, I wouldn't want those people around my kids or my grandkids or my nieces or nephews. And yet they force those relationships.
To think that they have children. But she has children, right? And you would think, like, when you get to a point of maturity where you have your own children, that you could put yourself in another parent's shoes.
To have the daughter of Amber Masick say about me, it's the daughter from her first marriage, so Amber Hull, to have her daughter tell people in Vicksburg that I have ruined her life all these years. And I'm like, you're pointing at me, but it's coming right back at you because I have done nothing to her. She was going to sue me. I said, okay, let's go. I have
sue you for what? Defamation or something?
Because we put up posters with Erik Cross's name on them and the Kalamazoo County Sheriff's Office and the Silent Observer phone number. Mm-hmm. And we put up these posters everywhere. And, you know, to be fair, so that we could not be accused of singling her out at her workplace in Kalamazoo or Portage.
Right.
We actually did a grid and we posted every single street for 5 miles to make sure that we hit every freaking corner, every lamp post, every telephone pole that we legally
Is that from your video that I saw on
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of funny because it's like I actually said one time on a video, I said, listen, if you are accusing, if this boy's face makes you blame me, that says more about you. If this
Says a
poster
lot more
haunts
about
you,
them than it does about
it
you.
says more about you than me or Eric's army or what we do and why we are here.
100%.
You know what? If your mom loved you, she'd have stopped this long ago and took that full immunity deal. If your mom gave two iotas about you or your sister, she'd have took the full immunity deal and walked away with no jail time. But maybe she wasn't able to because she was held accountable by those other ones in her crew of killers.
Right.
So for 39 years, they're still in contact with each other. They still are passing, money still changing hands here.
That is
There is
so
just a
sick.
very disturbing, yeah, that's a lot of money. But I was told Spaldings don't have that kind of money. Oh, come on. They sold one house in Kalamazoo at Woodward Avenue for 400 and some $1,000. They bought a new condo for about the same much in South Haven. That's where they live now. They live between South Haven and
Well, and
Michigan
to
on the
save
lake.
your ass and to save your kids' ass, it sounds like they'll go to any ends of the earth to do
I
that.
think back in
So
'83, well, our whole perspective is this. In '83, these people were more concerned about themselves, their incomes, their businesses,
their children's
the outlook.
future.
I don't even think that
You think it was more
because
them,
I think it was
self-preservation?
strictly self-preservation and the amount of cash these people made. Because look at Amber's dad had his own business and he was on the school board. Brian Sr. had his own business, and he even did after Eric's murder and since we've been doing this, they have redone the roof of the Vicksburg Library. Brent's pictured on top of the Vicksburg Library repairing the roof with other guys from their construction crew. So
Wow.
don't tell me that Vicksburg still doesn't have a little special warm spot for them. And why would they need to? I mean, most of those people are dead, retired, gone, you name it. But it's just a very disturbing thing that there's still connections floating around. But
Very.
they were all the top of their game back in '83. And all of a sudden it would have been all gone because one bad, if the neighbors would have found out or the village would have stepped up. But instead they just said, oh, let's turn a blind eye and just pretend nothing ever happened.
Pretend it
And
never
that's where
existed.
the crosses got screwed because was it because they were the new family or just because, it's like anything else. Um, you don't want to deal with it, so you pretend it doesn't exist.
Right.
And
Not
that's
their
exactly
kid.
what
It
Vicksburg
wasn't their kid.
no, exactly. But you know what? A lot of the Vicksburg families, their kids were at those
Could have
parties.
been their
Some
kid.
of them still follow because they know their kids are involved. Listen, their kids, some of those kids became alcoholics within that year. Some of them went to college and dropped out immediately because they just didn't want to be around people, wouldn't go to parties anymore. Folks, those are signs. Now, everybody nowadays knows every sign for everything anymore.
Hmm. But
But
back
back
then,
then, they knew the signs because your kid.
yeah,
If your kid
the
starts all of a
behavior
sudden in
changes.
1983,
There's something up.
right? All of a sudden, they don't want to go back to school in high school. All of a sudden, they want to move away. All of a sudden, they don't go to college because they find out they're there with other Vicksburg kids. All of a sudden,
Right. Somewhere they've lived their
they
whole life.
yeah, they went from being there's personality changes. There was guys that were just sweet and so friendly and would do anything for anybody back then, and outgoing. All of a sudden became introverts, angry,
Kept to
just mean,
themselves.
didn't want to be around people. Yeah, kept to themselves. And how do you flip a personality that quickly in one night? Well, you know what? It's because they all witnessed a lot more than they want to come forward and tell. And they're marrying each other. We can't.
I guess that's how you live with it. You stay
Yeah,
with someone who's
oh yeah, they all hang out at the bars. They all hang out on little pontoon boats and stuff and get drunk and talk about this case. Um, Class reunions have become a big place where they discuss the Eric Cross case, which is great because that means, you know what, for every
keep
one
it
of you
in the
that has to say
limelight.
it out loud, for every one of you that sees his face, for every one of you that says his name out loud, Eric wins. And you know what? Every time Eric wins, it puts another notch in the top of the coffin for all of his killers. And that's what's important. We've got to keep Eric's name out there because they benefited for 26 years of dust covering his case and his name on a box. That case is never going to collect dust again, and it's not going away until they do. And you know what? Just give all the police wanted in '83 to I mean, even well, when they were redoing, not in 83, but in 2000s, when they were doing this case, cold case and everything, they said, listen, even if you were there, all we want is the driver. We want whoever killed Erik. So the driver of the car, Tim Martin or Brent and Spalding. It was Brent. Okay, well, was it Brent? It was Brent, Tim, and Amber, who are the main people that killed Erik Cross. But the others all got involved. The others were all involved. And then what happened is they became conspirators. They became, and in the state of Michigan, conspiracy is the same as being the one that physically commits the
Right,
crime.
right.
They became, and then once they helped move a dead body, once they helped dump a dead body, once they kept secrets, that's what made them all murderers. But the police even tried to give them an out in 2000 to 2004 and said, Bill Cook, Amber Hull, Amber Masick, we want, give us Bill, Brent, and Tim, and you can walk. Here we sit. So why would Amber not give
Why
them
is she holding out?
them? Right.
Doesn't make any
That's
sense.
what everybody needs to start asking everybody. You know, at this point, listen, if you see him out in public, ask him, why are you holding out, Amber?
I'd love to talk to Amber. I would love to talk to her.
I went down there and stood in front of her current employer in Granger, Indiana. She lives in Edwardsburg, Michigan, with her ex-husband, was husband, now ex as of March this year. She goes back and forth according to her. And she lives in St. Joe, Michigan, in her own little apartment condo. But she works in Granger, Indiana. And then we went down there. We stood on the sidewalk. We actually talked to all the businesses around that office, told them who she was. They were fully disgusted and could not believe
they had no clue.
No clue, of course. And we went there a couple years in a row, and then we had the lockdown and stuff. And we've thought about doing a billboard, but the price of those went up like crazy because of the lockdowns and stuff. But we go down there and we're standing there, and they shut all the shades to the office. Shortly after that, her little husband comes rolling in and walks up, and they sneak her out the back door of the dentist office, and he drives her home.
What is she, a hygienist?
Yeah. Very highly paid hygienist too, from what it sounds like. But someone tore down the posters off the road after we left. And then I was talking to people that worked across the street at the store. And it's interesting to me because it was a certain member of the staff who tore down the posters.
Interesting.
We didn't break the law. We had full right to do that. We always check with the police anyway, and we let them know we're going to be in the area too, so in case there's issues. So we do a lot of pre-planning, and we do a lot of follow-up and stuff. And we thank the police for their help. We had the police drive by us several times. They knew we were not going to do anything vicious or anything like that.
How many people do you have helping you with this when you...
we have hundreds.
Over the years, just you've got
so
people
it's kind of cool because you always, what always works out is we have a rule that family is first in Erik's Army, which means, look, if your kids need you at home, you need to be at home. We're not going to hurt one family while we fight for another family.
Right.
And we need them healthy. We need them happy and strong. So it always works out somehow that, okay, so 2 people got to go because their kids are in soccer.
These other two.
Well, we got 2 new people.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have a strong group of about 55 that do
like your core people.
Core people, yeah. And then we have a smaller group of the super troopers that are the same group, and they aren't the same people that we started out with in 2010 October.
I'm sure you've brought people in, and you've kind of had a little revolving door, so to speak.
It is, and the thing is, some will go away for a year or so because they've got a lot going on in family. Life just gets in the way, and then they'll come back. They're like, hey. I want to help out again. My grandson's older. My daughter's
right. Their situation changes, and they find themselves with more time on their hands. And hey, exactly, I'm ready to help. That's awesome. Good for you for keeping this going.
It's just, you just gotta. It's kind of like I learned working retail. I managed a retail business for 20 years, and it dawned on me one day that everyone has special gifts. That they can bring and help with, and they have
absolutely.
And then also, if you've got 10 people, you've got 10 personalities. If you've got 50 people, you've got 50 personalities, and then you've got to figure out the ones that really mesh with each other and things like that. And then
get your core team together.
Yeah, our core crew that are, I don't want to say our core crew because that's what we call the killers. Our main group of people, men and women, are there. If I reach
Your
out and
army.
say privately, hey, I need help. We need to pick up these cans. Can you help? They're there. And we've got people that have picked up cans and got pink eye. And we had a group of high school kids that for their community service
That's nice.
project went and took back cans as soon as Michigan opened up the first part of the
That's
lockdown.
really nice
For
because educating these
community.
kids, like, hey, this
That's
happened a
exactly
long
it.
time
These
ago.
kids, yeah,
And
they're his age.
and yeah, and if this happens to someone you know, you guys need to speak up and not put
Well,
a
and that's
family through
exactly
this.
it. Because when Erik was murdered, either out of thinking it was funny or thinking it was some way to, make Amber feel better. But three of the kids, those three were all put on homecoming courts in Vicksburg High School after they murdered Erik.
Wow.
It's a community no one wants to belong to, is losing a family member and stuff. But we kind of we grow in that way too, because you become support for other families in similar situations, especially in Michigan, but outside of Michigan. They will reach out to us and say, hey, how do I get attention? What do I do? Where do I go? And I'm like, I'm flat out honest. I just say, look, we are tried. We are a try group. We try everything. We try it more than once. Sometimes it doesn't work. Maybe it's the wrong time of year. Maybe it's the wrong person. We go back and we try it again. We keep track of, okay, this worked for us. Let's do it again.
Right.
But give us this much time. Do you know the majority of witnesses that were coming in during our pop can drives?
Really?
Yeah, it dawned on me finally, I guess what it is they would come to these pop can drives. They'd make sure it was just Erik's Army in our purple shirts standing around talking. We'd talk to them, we'd welcome them. Sometimes they'd bring us dollars in can or something, or they'd say, hey, I got $5. It's like, you know what? We love you for that. But what it would do was they would feel you out a little bit, and then they would start talking and say, I went to school with this one, or I went to college with Amber.
I noticed this or I
I
noticed
know
that.
I noticed this, and I know this from this person, and this is their name and phone number. And they'd bring us, we'd get business cards, we'd get names and phone numbers, and every one of them talked to Erik's detectives. Every one of them. We had, like, every month we were doing a pop can drive, and some we were doing two in a month, which can be a real hard thing on Erik's volunteers, especially because we try to do them when it's warmer out.
Yeah.
And that, of course, is summertime is impossible because Michigan is a big summer state. So we would have a couple volunteers and we'd try to mix it up. We'd always try to have a couple guys and a couple girls just for safety, but also because guys sometimes are more comfortable
Comfort
talking to
levels.
whatever
Yeah.
they're saying. Yeah, the comfort level. And all ages, we had teenagers, we had high school kids, middle school kids with their parents
It's a
and
good lesson
grandparents
for
and stuff.
them to learn,
It
to
really
see
is
what
because they
these
understand
people put this family through.
what 6 can drives in a row,
Hmm.
6 witnesses in a row.
Wow.
6 new witnesses in 6 can drives one summer, and from spring to end of summer. And I'm like, I don't know how much more these Erik's Army can take right now
Yeah.
because I'm going to wear them out. But I mean, every step of the way, there was always one more ready to say, I can do it. I can do it.
That's
Yeah,
so
I'll do it.
nice. Yeah.
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 And I
But there's
think as we go on, like this year with the amount of information that's been coming in since February, I think people are at that point now where they see all this going on in the world and they're like, you know what? I always tell people, be the change you want to see,
hmm
because if you're not doing it, who's going to do it?
right. It's time to do the right
And
thing.
yeah, I mean, we had a lady come in from Sheridan, Michigan. Her brother's name is Marshall. He was murdered in 1983 at the end of the year, in November, I think it was. Marshall and Erik could have been brothers. I
Oh
mean, they
wow.
look that much alike. He's in the video that we did for Remembrance, a couple of them. He's in the football jersey with the football under his arm. Erik and Marshall were both born in 1966, 6 months apart.
Oh wow.
Erik and Marshall were both murdered in 1983, 6 months apart.
Oh my gosh.
Erik was murdered by this group of people that beat him and then, destroyed him with a car and stuff. Marshall was run down by a neighbor with his pickup truck because he just was a dick, and he ran him down and he threw him in the bed of the truck, went back, got his sister, took Marshall out in the woods. This is in the winter time, November. Um, buried his body, set him on fire, and tried to burn him, and then buried him in the leaves and stuff. They caught Marshall
Sick
Taylor.
people.
Sick. And these are all Michigan. This is all Michigan.
Yeah, it's
Every bit of
scary.
this is Michigan.
It's craziness everywhere. It really is.
Yeah.
It really
Michael
is.
Michael Smith out of Lansing was up and coming rap star, was shot and killed in a parking garage. His mom is still fighting, but she's alone in her fight with family, of course. And then I was putting the video together, and I was talking about the upcoming lighting a candle on September 25th for murder victims. And that is actually Erik's birthday as well. So it's like,
oh, he just had a birthday pass then.
Yeah, September 25th. So I was putting this together, and I said, if anybody wants to acknowledge someone, and I thought I'd try to put as many names and faces into the video from those that follow Erik, because that's how people come. One was a woman that was murdered by a military. Her husband was in the military. She was having an affair with a guy across the hall who was in the military, and he murdered her because she found out she was pregnant, and she thought she was going to have a life with him. Erin is her name. Her body has never been recovered. She's dumped in a mine shaft, they believe, and her cousin is who actually reached out and helps with Erik Cross's volunteer stuff.
Wow.
And this is this month right now, October 10th is 12 years that I've been doing this 365 days a year.
Wow. Bless your heart.
Well, and this was I actually just started to be supportive of Erik's sister and his mom. I didn't know that I would be here, but I did everything, step by step with her, and I tried to keep it out there with her. And there came a point where her mom said, I can't lose both of my kids to these people. And it's like, that's very deep, but yeah, I totally understood really that. Sad. And I said, and she said, is Missy still out there? And she goes, yes. And she goes, then I'm okay. And that's Erik's mom. So she knows that when you say me, it means Erik's army. When you say any of Erik's army, we are one. We are Erik's army. That's why for the longest time you didn't see any of our faces. You only saw maybe the shirts. Maybe you just saw Erik's posters. You just saw that because we didn't want to make anybody else to be the face of anything to do with Justice for Erica, but Erik Cross.
Right.
The lockdown is the only reason that we started doing the lives because in Michigan, the lockdowns lasted longer and you couldn't get out in posters. So we made sure that we used the captive audience. Basically, we knew everybody was stuck in their houses. So let's start promoting Erik and reach as many people right now that are looking for something new to watch and see and hear about. And we gained a huge new following for Erik. And Erik is actually, nationwide and outside of the U.S. We have a lot of people that tune in. We have a lot of people from Ireland. We have people from the UK, all over, and they are faithful followers of Erik's, supporters of Erik's, and they've bought T-shirts. We've had to send T-shirts to Japan and
that's awesome.
Australia.
Isn't it crazy how you can touch people across the globe? Yeah. So if there's ever anything too that you would like me to share on my social media, I'd be willing to do that as well. So
I'd love it.
Yeah, go ahead and just send it to me, and I'll share it.
And we said, Erik's mom said, I don't want anybody else hurt. I don't drag Erik's name through the mud.
Right.
Do everything
Make it respectful.
Be respectful. And, I think we're not perfect, obviously. And look, this is a learning thing for us. Every day we learn new things. We learn new ways and
nothing like this comes with a manual. Like, here, this is what you do.
We're writing it daily. And you know what might work today may not work tomorrow. And that's the same thing when I tell other families is like, you know what, try it. If it comes in your brain, try it. It's kind of like, you don't know until you fail.
Right.
You don't know until you succeed. And if it succeeds, your guys win. Your person wins. Erik wins. That's okay, because I want to let everybody know that has family members in this situation or may end up having a family member in this kind of situation. You have rights, and that victim had rights, and that victim should still have somebody standing up for them. And whoever that takes, whatever that takes, however it needs to get done, and we choose to do it in a respectful and try to do it in a peaceful way. And we've actually had judges compliment us on our behavior.
That's the way to do it,
No, there isn't. And, I know other groups that go crazy wild and they go at people. That's not my personality, but I've got people in my group that I've got to talk off the ledge occasionally because it just emotionally it overtakes them.
And everybody's different. Like you said, there's such a mix of personalities that
everyone's
going to respond differently. I
then
mean,
so
God
be
knows
it.
what this kid would have grown up to be and have and
Well,
become,
that's the thing, and to cut it and that
cut it
and
short like
that
that and then be able to just skate through life, just not telling the truth. Just there's
yeah.
something wrong with that.
And they didn't just take Eric's life. I mean,
His
they took Eric's
family,
dad's life. Yeah, they took his mom and his
they were
dad. His
never the
dad
same again, I'm
took
sure.
a brother, a son, a grandson. They took away grandkids. They took away nieces and nephews from Jackie and from her mom. No
And
grandkids
I'm
from
sure
him.
they had
You know,
issues with, trusting people and,
oh man,
what kind of
well,
people
especially
are
when
in this
especially
world with
20,
us.
yeah, especially 26 years of crickets.
You guys are
Maybe
doing
some
a lot of
changes.
good. You're not just doing one thing. You have a lot of things that are coming together
Yeah,
from your one focus. So I want to
not
thank
bad
you
for
again
just
for talking to me
5
today.
minutes.
And
Oh, absolutely.
yeah,
I
if there's
appreciate your
ever
time.
any updates or anything like that, feel free to send them my way so I can share them. Because I'm sure
Can
once
you?
I do this,
Yeah.
that my audience is going to want to follow. So
I'm excited. I am very appreciative of Jay for Justice helping and being there and trying to help Erik and
for sure.
support it, being supportive and doing what you do for everyone too, because you put a lot out there for people to help them, and that's what we beg for is help.
Hmm.
Sometimes we just want
Just
people
working
to help
together,
us
spreading the
spread
word, getting the
It
news
is.
out
It
there. That's
really
all it
is,
is.
and you can turn something hopefully positive. I
All
appreciate
right.
it. Thank you
Thanks,
so much.
Missy. Have a great rest of your
All
day.
right.
Thanks for all
Yep.
you
You
do.
too. Thank you.
Okay.
You
Bye
too.
bye.
Thank you. Bye.